That was maybe one of my better intros. That was good. I do not have official permission, by the way, from Metallica to be using that song. But one of the reasons I do use that song in my intros is because I would actually skateboard down Lombard Street listening to that song. That's San Francisco when I was a teenager. I am Ian Hamilton Trottier. This is Discussion of Truth. Windward Radio, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking out the podcast, whichever form, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever it may be. We have been in discussion over the course, recently. There's an Arizona-based FM station, 2 million listeners that has expressed interest in the show that I deliver Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, this is a double header coming at you 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. And there is also another a major network based out of California. They do online radio programs. They tell me that one of the senators in that state uses them. They have also said that they enjoy the content that the Discussions of Truth delivers. As well, they should. Again, if this is your first time, just go to your browser, type in bit.ly. It's a shortened link, bit.ly. Type in bit.ly/ and that's / I believe it's / Zika, that's capital Zika, capital M, Miami, capital B, beach. Capital Zika, again, capital Zika, Zika, all capitals, Miami Beach, capital M&B. Type that in. If you just simply type that in without the shortened link, you might even also find it. Zika Miami Beach. Type in my name, Ian Trottier. That's INTROTTIER. I was shortly thereafter after that happened in 2016, contacted by Miriam Hennon, who's been on the program about 3 times. She has been on the program 3 times. She runs honeycolony.com. She has interviewed Aaron Brockovich. She's been asked to, I don't know if she's been on Bill Maher yet, but she's been in contact with Bill Maher about being on his program. She saves the honeybees. Okay, that's one of the adverse effects to the chemical revolution, if you will, in sorts, the adverse effects on our honeybees. We have a dying population of honeybees, which sooner or later is going to drastically affect the way that we live our lives. But she had asked me about because I was tweeting about being opposed, my position of the Dibrom. Now, so if you did catch the Jerry Croft episode, we just got off the phone line with him, the Skype line with him. If you did catch that, the link, and I didn't make the link the last hour, but the link between Dibrom and Zika, if it doesn't blow you away, it should. Okay, and it is the main reason that I do what I do every Wednesday afternoon. Dibrom, the pesticide used in Miami Beach, and Wynwood neighborhood, Dibrom is a Chevron Chemical Corporation chemical mosquito repellent. I mean, talking about definition of the deep state, folks, it most likely goes beyond any information that you can garner off of Google. Most information, even if you had access to CIA files, whether it's top secret or beyond top secret, of how many other levels there are beyond the top secret levels, information that certainly the White House and the Oval Office is not privy to. You're talking about a link between a mosquito pesticide, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Zika virus itself, which, if you type in I think it's ACCT, it's a lab out of England that actually, if you have the proper credentials, you can order a vial of the Zika virus to study. Sure you can. And who's got the patent on that? The Rockefellers. And the Rockefellers also the largest shareholders of, they own basically Chevron Chemical Corporation. So there is a link between, and then you can kind of throw in eugenics. There's all sorts of little trails you can trace here. But that's why I have Cecil Rhodes' last will and testament up on my website. You have a link to it. It's free. Click it. It doesn't cost you anything to go through it. iantrottier.com. Click on articles and you'll find a number of great articles to research. And that helps explain why I do what I do every Wednesday. Because there's a need for it. Because you should not be watching CNN. You should not be watching MSNBC. You should not be watching CBS. You should not be watching ESPN, for crying out loud. Okay? Very much. Very, very much. I mean, the sports are, of course, athletics are entertaining. Okay? But you should not be watching mainstream media. Because you are being brainwashed. And you are being pigeonholed. And you are deliberately, a la Charlotte Iserbyt, you are deliberately being dumbed down. Surf, not with an E, or excuse me, not with a U, with an E. Surf. That is what you are expected to be, is a good tax-paying surf. Okay? Just be a little cog in the wheel to make the wheel go round, and no, you don't own the wheel. The Oval Office doesn't even know who owns the wheel, right? I mean, who owns the wheel? Who really makes the economy go? But that's why I like to get into the Federal Reserve. And yes, this all started because of a link between the Dibrom mosquito repellent and the Zika virus. Okay, the so-called, because this is your mainstream media brainwashing you. Oh, be so scared of the Zika virus. Be so scared. Yet I have it in email from highly trained and accomplished authors at New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet saying that there is no direct link that Zika causes microcephaly. Nothing directly. Oh, but be so scared. And spray DEET. Spray your skin with DEET. So what's interesting here, and we're going to bring on JP here in a few minutes, a couple minutes, but DEET, which is a common ingredient in your like your common repellents at Publix or Piggly Wiggly. You may not have heard of that if you're in Miami, but DEET. So I befriended this former Army fellow who, and I won't get into that, but at the same time that Zika and DEET, or Zika and Dibrom were a debate, not nearly a large enough debate. It didn't really carry much further outside of Miami-Dade at the time, but there was a small debate. About the same time, I had befriended this guy that was in Iraq and fighting in the Army, and he says, hey, she says, Ian, the Army would prohibit us from spraying DEET on our skin. We're not allowed to use that because of the adverse chemical reactions. Yet the local counties, anyway, Miami-Dade, was saying, "Hey, you gotta spray DEET. You gotta in order to defend yourself from Zika." So it's a big deal. A lot of contradictions there. And if you haven't checked out the Health Ranger Mike Adams, who has expressed interest in being on the program, if you haven't checked out what he does in Texas, and he says it's a deadly combination, that is DEET and Dibrom. I don't know if he says Dibrom per se, but these other mosquito repellents. So there's something deeper going on here that can take you down various kind of holes, and call it what you want. Call it a theory. Call it a conspiracy theory. Certainly is a theory. Conspiracy, I don't know if it's a conspiracy. That's not something that I know. Now I was asked today, Paul Hellyer, former guest on the program, as far as are there extraterrestrial influences He didn't ask me today, but somebody asked me, are there extraterrestrial influence on the planet? I don't know. I haven't seen or heard, or I don't know. But I will say this. Paul Hellyer, who's now in his 90s, and I think outside of Prince Philip, the Queen of England's husband, outside of he's the largest or longest ranking political figure in Canada. He's a former deputy prime minister for that country. He says that he knows for a fact, he says he knows for a fact that there are extraterrestrial influences on this planet. Okay, and I know David Icke is a former guest on the program. He's even said so. No, I don't go there because until I see it or until I hear it, then I won't go there. I'm not saying it's not happening, but what I am saying is that yes, the White House is being manipulated. You just heard Jerry Croth say it. Okay, he's a former professor at Santa Clara. That there is a deeper hidden organization or organizations that are clearly running this country and therefore running global policy and global economics. Okay, as I forget that the Rockefellers, the land that the United Nations sits on, was donated by the Rockefellers. Okay, so up until 2016, I never envisioned myself talking about this. But being exposed to that very controversial pesticide and just seeing how it was handled by the local government, how it was being puppeted by more powerful strings, I realized that yes, just like Jerry just said on the program, there is no democracy. Okay, it's the best democracy that money can buy. And Anthony Sutton, who's a former Stanford Hoover Fellow, who again I've got a number of links to his books. They're all accessibly free on my website, iantroutj.com. Anthony Sutton, one of his books is actually titled "The Best Enemy Money Can Buy." Yes, he goes down a trail of Prescott Bush, Union Bank, and different CIA and American ties corporations that are not only funding the Western attack, but they're also funding the Eastern attack in World War II. They're funding Nazi Germany. So they're funding the enemy and the ally. Yes, this is fact. Okay, this is fact. This is fact. This really happened. And many of these layers, look, 200 years is a very short period of time. You think about a kingdom like the United Kingdom. Think about England or Britain. They've been ruling. But Oxford is an institution that is, I think, just about 1,000 years old, right? And we've got, since the inception of the Constitution, we have 250 years, 240 years. 240 years is a blink of an eye. Well, a blink of an eye as far as a city like Rome is concerned. Rome. Right. Deep state? Any connection? Roman Empire? What are the elements of the Roman Empire that still exist? So looking at things in a different way, an alternative view, could be a benefit. And that's why I come to you every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard. Next week, as I've mentioned, we're going to be bringing JP on here momentarily. Next week, Josh Reeves, Dallas-based radio host and filmmaker, can be joining us. He's got his daily show called weekly show, I'm not sure when it airs, the Global Reality Show. And then after Josh, we're bringing another doubleheader your way next week, because after Josh, conservative pundit Dr. Jane Ruby is going to be joining. We'll be joining Discussions of Truth. You can check her out at drjaneruby.com. She is much against mass media, and she will be joining us next week. February 5th, we're going to starting off February with Family of Secrets. The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years by Russell Warren Baker. Russ is a publisher and investigative journalist, controversial, credible, courageous. Baker is an editor-in-chief and founder of nonprofit news organization WhoWhatWhy.com. Check out the website. Native of Venice, California, Russ has a BA in political science from UCLA and an MA from Columbia School of Journalism. He's a former contributing editor of the Columbia Journalism Review. In his 25-plus year career, Baker has written for a variety of publications, including the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, the Washington Post, Esquire, Vanity Fair, and the Village Voice. Bill Moyer said this about Russ: he seemed unimpressed with conventional wisdom. Good, right? Quickly spotted and dismissed spin and wasn't intimidated by the powers that be. What are those powers? Baker is the author of 2008 book Family Secrets, which raises uncomfortable questions about members of the Bush family and their careers and relationships outside of politics, and presents evidence of connections between President George H.W. Bush and individuals involved with the Watergate scandal and assassination of, yet again, President Kennedy. And we're going to follow that up in February 12th with Kevin Arnett. Arnett. He's a renowned global human rights campaigner, author, and whistleblower who has led the movement to expose and prosecute child murder by church and state in Canada and Europe. Kevin is the co-founder of the International Tribunal of Crimes of Church and State. He has been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, he says. Murder by Decree, The Crime of Genocide in Canada is the name of his book. And then February 19th, as previously mentioned, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. Bandy Lee, MD and MDiv, of Divinity that is, Yale University, organizer of the Yale Duty to Warn Conference. Bandy will be joining us the 19th of February. And rounding out February will be, for the second time, Tom Hartman will be joining us again for the second time. We've got a slate of incredible guests coming your way all the way up into April. Thank you for tuning in to Wynwood Radio. This is Ian Hamilton-Trottier for Discussions of Truth. Again, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. We're now going to bring in J.P. Linstroth. So again, using our wonderful Skype technology, ring in J.P. here. Stand by. Okay, JP typically prefers a phone. Let's see if we can dial him in via phone. Again, standing by, this is Ian Trottier for Discussions of Truth, Wynwood Radio. Look for JP Linstroth here. Bring him in by phone. Little mobile studio here.
Hello?
JP.
Hey, Ian.
Great to connect with you again. Happy 2020.
You too. You too. Thanks.
So, JP, it's been the last Linstroth report that we delivered was, what was that, in November? Did we have one in December? It's been a while.
I think it's been a while. Yeah, I think it was November. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
So, if this is your first time listening to JP, JP's a former Fulbright Scholar to Brazil. He's got his PhD from Oxford, and we have for over a year, or close to a year now. Certainly, you've been a multi-guest on the program, but for a number of months now, we have strived to bring the Linstroth Report to listeners, because the work that you do is very important, JP.
I really appreciate that, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show. And yes, and I've been a recurring guest since 2017, so I'm really happy about that.
And you've got and we discussed prior, but you've got a book that initially we were going to discuss, but we will wait because of an agreement until that's released. Are you able to mention the name of the book, the title of the book?
Yeah. I mean, it's shortlisted for a prize. So I think that's why the publisher is being a little bit cagey about it, but that's fine. And I want to defer to them. But the book is called Epochal Reckonings. It's a book. I would call it a book of political poetry.
Oh,
and what
fun.
I mean by that is that it's on it's about the crises of the 21st centuries, or like major events, at least up until August of this past year when I submitted it, and then so it's got shortlisted for this prize, and basically it's about a recurring theme in the book is racism, and then some of the poetry themes are 9/11, killing of African American young men by police. What else? The Hurricane Katrina, the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, and 9/11, and so various themes that that I felt were significant in the 21st century, and I think that somebody who might not normally pick up a book of poetry might want to pick up this book just because the topics are kind of interesting and topical.
Epochal Reckonings.
Epochal Reckonings, yes, sir.
JP, is this the same publisher you've used in the past, or a new publisher?
It's a new publisher, yeah, and it's a new publisher, and the book is shortlisted for a prize, and so I think what they wanted to do was kind of wait until the book was published to kind of, then go on kind of a marketing campaign, as it were.
Are you in a position to name that publisher?
I'd prefer not to, just because I don't want to give away the prize at the moment.
Yep.
And so I want to defer to them because they want to announce the finalist and the winner and so on.
Okay. And are you able to mention the award or prize that it's nominated for?
Well, it's the same name of the publisher. So
okay.
so that's why I'm being a little bit cagey about that.
JP.
But thank you for asking me, though. But thank you. Yeah.
Of course. What's the release date?
I think it'll be out in April. That's what I was told. So
okay, so we'll have that discussion then in April regarding Epochal Reckonings. JP, what are your thoughts on the ridiculous fires that now? People are being hurt, people's livelihoods are being changed, but it to me it's like you couple the fires going on in Brazil, you couple these ridiculously random fires that seem to be wildfires that happen in California. That's why I use the word ridiculous. Is not. I don't want to be hurting anybody's feelings. I realize that people's lives are changing here, but it just seems a little bit out of control. What are your thoughts on these fires in Australia, JP?
Yeah, I was going to talk today about the legacy of King, because it's 52 years since his death. But we can talk about the fires a little bit too. What I would say is that surprisingly, and because of climate change, fires have been going on over the world, not only in Brazil, but also in Central Africa, in the Congo area, in the northern hemisphere, in Russia, and now in Australia. And what I think it's fairly clear to say that it's climate related because of the dipolar warm currents that have occurred this year. And if you just comparing, for example, the Brazilian fires, which have destroyed 6 million acres in Brazil, comparing that with the Australian fires, which have destroyed up to now, and they're still ongoing, 13 million acres, Ian.
Wow.
So it's doubled, and it's really huge. I mean, I think it's hard to get our heads around the sense of like how many animals have been killed in these brush fires. I mean, estimates by different scientists, 500 million animals, which, these are unique marsupials, which, as you know, are unique to that continent, which, obviously the famous ones are kangaroos and koalas and wallabies, right? But just devastating people's homes and so on and so forth. But scientists are saying, well, this is just the beginning, and when they say things like that kind of, you hear kind of the opposite in Davos, Switzerland, yesterday and today about people really kind of denying the issue. I think it's problematic, obviously.
Yeah. It's what is I haven't been keeping up with it at all. I mean, I have seen some pictures on the wildlife. That is this another wildfire? What caused this one?
This is due to the dry conditions in Australia, the extreme drought.
Yeah,
they haven't had any water, and extremely dry conditions, and then these what's called the dipolar currents, which is kind of like the El Nino effect in the Western Hemisphere, which occurs kind of in the Indian Ocean area up in the Pacific, the currents surrounding Australia. And so that, along with the dry conditions, have caused these fires. And I just, it's just devastating. I mean, I think some of them probably were accidents, but they're totally different in scope as far as how they began. And politically, you can say that in Brazil, at least, it's really cattle farmers who are responsible for the fires in Brazil.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, it's more because of these drought conditions.
So is this a reflection of the climate changing globally?
I would have to say yes, and I would have to say that it's pretty clear, yeah. And I would, just based on what I've read and based on what scientists are saying.
Yeah. Okay, so let's transition now, JP. Let's get into some of the current stuff that you're working on. Are you releasing counterpunch articles? Well, let's get into what you want to tackle.
Right. So, I mean, Monday here was the holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to just talk about King's legacy, at least. I was there. I was at the Lorraine Motel, which is now a museum. That's where he was shot in Memphis back in 1968. I was there for the 40th anniversary. I happened to, just by chance, meet Jesse Jackson, who was there with King when he died. But I think one of the things that is important to talk about is really King's legacy as far as dealing with poverty, dealing with racism, dealing with equal rights, even in our society today. I think that those legacies are important today, and especially important for young people that don't have the King assassination or Malcolm X assassination in living memory, that this is maybe their grandparents' generation that that were alive when those tragic events happened.
JP,
so the last article I wrote was about understanding that peacemakers aren't necessarily people that work in the peace studies field, but people that actually help society in general, like psychologists, psychiatrists, public teachers that work in lower socioeconomic schools, firemen, policemen. And I think there's been a recent study by Steven Pinker wrote a book called Better Angels of Our Nature, showing that in general, society is more peaceful than it was, for example, comparatively, like in the Middle Ages.
Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Now, backing up just slightly, JP, did you mention that you had dialogue with Reverend Jackson?
So I met Jesse Jackson. I really just shook his hand at that museum.
Okay.
I didn't dialogue with him. I mean, he actually writes for Counterpunch as well, Ian. So
okay, I didn't know that.
So I haven't really dialogued with him personally. I'd like to one day, but I mean, maybe when my new nonfiction book comes out,
right?
And that book's coming out, and the publisher wants that book in March, and that book is a nonfiction book about racism and extreme discourse and a lot of things that we're seeing today in the United States.
So this is a loaded topic, obviously, with the Black Lives Matter, and I think there were the Honolulu police, were there any black officers on that? I don't know, but it seems like these shootings are becoming commonplace. I mean, it's like you've got the mass shootings in these schools as one thing, but then these black either black cops are getting shot or white cops are shooting blacks. What is, as much as there has been such great development and progress from the Martin Luther King days and era, not to mention, of course, that he was assassinated himself, but it seems that balance has come to society racially so much in such a greater form since those days, but yet we've got these persistent problems.
Right. I think that, I mean, after the Michael Brown killing and after Trayvon Martin was killed, I mean, I think that the last presidential administration, the Obama administration, as you know, probably put millions of dollars in getting police body cameras, right? So I think that was a federal initiative to get police body cameras. So that's one issue to make, I guess, police more accountable. And actually, talking to policemen, they feel also better to have them, many of them. My cousin is a policeman in Minnesota, or he just retired, I think, this past year. And my brother-in-law happens to be a fireman. So what you're correct in pointing out that I think that the Me Too movement really began after the Michael Brown killing in Ferguson, Missouri. And I think it's a really delicate issue because obviously, officers are trained to react to situations of danger. And I don't want to take anything away from officers who are doing their duty, doing their job. But I think that some of these cases, some of them, point to the need for more training and maybe more community awareness or more community involvement. And that's certainly not the case for many policemen who are well trained and who are doing their job and who are in the communities and so on. And my cousin's a good example of a police officer who's spent his career with community involvement.
Yeah.
But I think in some circumstances, and that's why these cases have blown up or created, like, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, I mean,
but in some cases right.
There was a highly, I think it became a motion picture. I don't remember who released it, but it was called Fruitville, based off of a shooting a white cop. Maybe it was a taser incident. It might have been a taser incident. I don't know if it was shooting or tasering or what it was, but somebody lost their life. The black youth had lost their life. So you think, JP, you think that a reformation to the way that police academies, perhaps across the country, train new cadets. You think an entire course perhaps should go into racial understanding, or how would you envision that type of process, educational process happening, or training process happening?
Again, I'm not a policeman, so I can't say I am the expert on this issue or this field, but I have been in peace studies and conflict resolution for a while. And I think what the Ferguson case pointed out was that here you have a largely black neighborhood, which was Ferguson's a suburb of St. Louis, right, in Missouri. Here and you have very little African American police officers in that unit.
Interesting.
So obviously that in that case you needed more people from the community becoming police officers, more involvement, so you don't have this separation of the perception of racial profiling, right? And at least, I think a lot of police forces are doing this, and at least the large ones I know are moving towards conflict resolution, are thinking about how to be more communally involved, and have been doing so for quite some time. This is the racial profiling issue is a huge issue, and has been ongoing and criticized for a long time, since really the 80s. But the whole idea of body cameras and some of the newer ideas of peace studies and conflict resolution, I think, have been helpful. And I know that when I was at least teaching in a conflict resolution academic department, there were police officers and former police officers and people interested in and creating better atmospheres in those dynamics. And as I said, it's complicated. There's gray areas, obviously, and they're trained, obviously, to handle very dangerous situations. So I want to repeat that, and I have to be repetitive here. I want to repeat that I don't want to take away from the excellent work that police officers do, because they do excellent work in the community already, and they do very dangerous jobs. And I would say the most dangerous jobs in the United States, because they're always dealing with danger and things on the line, and some of the most dangerous situations are domestic violence. But I certainly think that the trend is to have, people who are in the peace studies field and conflict resolution. I think departments are now at least hiring people to do courses and things like that.
Right. Now, not that there's a parallel at all, but I believe my understanding is that in England, for instance, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that their police departments, their officers carry the bobbies, I think, as they're referred to. I don't think that they carry guns. Not to say that that could be something that could be replicated here, because guns are just flying.
It changed a little bit, in the sense that traditionally they haven't, right? You're correct.
Okay.
But after 9/11 and after they had, the London subway bombings,
right,
security still stepped up. So they're, around Parliament, obviously, and around areas that need to be secured, that there's officers with guns. You see more of that presence. But in general, that's true that they don't.
So okay. So
they don't have the issue. They don't have the issue in the UK, Ian, as you know, because they don't have the Second Amendment and they don't have the right to bear arms. They don't. Weapons aren't. Guns aren't available like that in the U.S. Okay?
Right. Yeah. I knew it was a very awkward parallel to even consider drawing, but I wanted to bring it up anyway. So Martin Luther King to 2020, and we've still got these continual racial issues. Why do we have that? Why is that a persistent issue in American culture? I mean, your answer to that
Yeah.
might be, well, hey, how does a guy like Donald Trump get into the office? But is America, from your view, JP, and not that this is your specialty at all, but is America racially divided still?
I would say yes, it is. I would
Easily.
say yes, and I would say, look, here's the thing about race in the United States, and as I was always talk about this with other people, that race is in every country, right? You can find racism in every country, whether it's France, or whether it's England, or whether it's Canada, whether it's Brazil, or I don't care where you go in the world, China, Russia, wherever. You're going to have racism because people define difference, right?
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
define difference, and there's a biological aspect of this because of how cognitively people define difference in their minds, and how that works out. But as anthropologists, and I've talked about this before, I think on your program, that on the Trottier show, that race is a socio-cultural construct. In other words, people
Sure.
define it culturally. People define who they are as an ethnic group, and difference culturally, and define boundaries culturally. But I think, and to get a little bit controversial, that the Trump administration, or at least Donald Trump, in talking about some of these sensitive issues, in some ways has made it worse. I think it's clear what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2016. Some of the rhetoric that he used wasn't helpful at all. And so I think, and I've written about this too, and I think that kind of signaling gets the wrong message across. And what I worry, though, is that it gets the wrong message across to kids, to young people.
Of course.
So the legacy of King, yes, and in some ways we're better. Obviously, we're better with having the civil rights legislation that was passed in the 1960s. Is it as racially divided as it was in the, when King was alive? Well, we're a much more desegregated society. We're much more celebratory of African Americans than ever, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's Hollywood. But the racial divides are still there, and it's still a touchstone, and it's still sensitive. And I think that's clear in the divides that have happened from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. I think it's some of it's clear.
Do you think
what do you think?
Well, do you think a figure like a Martin Luther King, given the shrinkage of the middle class, do you think a figure like a Martin Luther King would be able to gain that type of support and following in today's society as he did in the 60s? Do you think it'd be possible today?
Well, the issues aren't as pressing. In other words, the issues of poverty and the issues of imprisonment and the issues of housing and some of those legacies are still there. But the issues that he was fighting for, civil rights of voting, equal voting, have gone away with that legislation being passed with Lyndon B. Johnson. Would King? There are kind of people around that have taken over. I mean, if you look at, for example, Cornel West,
sure, yeah,
who was at Princeton, now he's at Harvard again. He's one of the African American intellectuals. He was critical of Obama, President Obama, and President Obama not doing enough for poverty, for example. You have Michael Dyson, who's I believe at Lehigh University. He's been outspoken. He was outspoken about Katrina, for example. He's another scholar. I think you find some of these voices more in academia, Ian, and I think, but I as far as, the movement being as strong, I mean, I don't think Al Sharpton has the intellectual gifts that King had, or the rhetoric of Malcolm X. Now, Sharpton's a good leader, but I mean, the issues have changed. Some of them have remained the same. But I think that obviously the times have changed. So the people leading the Black Lives Matter movement are different people. But the legacies of King and Malcolm X and those types of civil rights leaders persist because of the resonance of the times in which they spoke, and because of the urgency of the matter, because of the Jim Crow South that was still existing 100 years after the Civil War.
Yeah, No, it's really an entire episode, if not an entire book, to really try to understand the psyche of the American people and what that makes up, because there's so many different demographics involved in that, and yes, we're in a totally different country in many ways today in 2020 with the color barrier being crossed everywhere. I mean, Clarence Thomas has been on the Supreme Court for a couple decades now, if not more,
right.
and Thurgood Marshall before him. So there's you're talking about leaders such as Cornel West, and there's just brilliant minds of all ethical backgrounds, really, that are rising, not just from the African American community, if you will. And that, I think, is one of the great things about the United States. But it is somewhat jaw dropping to a degree to look back at this and say, well, as far as we have come, we still have these enormous challenges put forth ahead of us. And so as much progress
right.
as has been made, perhaps very little progress in the large scheme of things has been.
I think so. I mean, I remember hearing when Obama was first elected, when Barack Obama was first elected, that now we're in a post-racial America.
Right. Okay.
And that was a feeling among, a few academics, few scholars, but it's proven to be not the case at all, actually.
Right.
Especially with some of these racially motivated killings. And I won't even limit it to the African American community, and because we see a lot of anti-Semitism today as well. People, shooting at mosques, at Jewish temples, and so whether it's the Jewish minority or even Muslim minorities, minorities have been targeted, and we can extend that to new immigrants. Okay, so and I think, and this is one of the interesting legacies too of Dr. Martin Luther King, is that at the end of his life, he was extending the civil rights movement and not limiting it just to African Americans, but he wanted to embrace the Chicano movement. He wanted to embrace Appalachian whites, right? People, poor whites. He wanted to make it more embracing. And another legacy too, and I think this needs to be mentioned, is that he came out against the Vietnam War. And he lost a lot of people with that, Ian. And one of the people that actually helped convince him to go against the war was this Vietnamese monk who's still alive. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but he is a Vietnamese monk. I think he's like a living saint. And he's lived all of his life in exile because of the Vietnam War, and convinced Dr. Martin Luther King to go against the war as part of his movement of nonviolence. And so I think too, we have to question what are, the idea of just war. What is a just war? Are all the conflicts that the United States have been involved in, or all those have been necessarily just to be involved in, right?
Yeah, they're all highly questionable. I personally think any war really should be questionable. It's just it's a sign of mental weakness of man and man's desire for greed. In many instances, I think war is really a disgusting aspect of life. There's really no need for it, but it is
Right.
it's here, and it's
Right.
an element of our history, and unfortunately, likely
Right.
element of somebody's future. So okay,
Right.
so JP, we've covered a lot here, and winding down here for the hour. What else would you like to leave with listeners, JP? What else have you got cooking outside of that? And not mention that this is something that will be found in JP's book release in April. The Black Lives Matter. Is that correct, JP? That'll be addressed in your book coming up here.
That's going to be addressed in my in the poetry book Epochal Reckonings, but it's also going to be addressed in my nonfiction book, which I need to get to the publisher by March, and so that book is called Crises Beyond Nationalities, and we're still, I guess, negotiating the title, but provisionally, Crises Beyond Nationalities, racism, politics, and extreme rhetoric in the modern era, something like that.
Oh,
but that'll be coming out soon, and hoping at least hopefully by the fall. So the Epochal Reckonings coming out in April, and then I have this other one coming out hopefully by this coming fall. But how would I? And I mean, gosh, Ian, I mean, like one of the reasons why I wrote the Epochal Reckonings is political poetry just kind of underline how many crises we have around the world, whether we're talking about the genocide in Myanmar with the Rohingya,
mm-hmm.
or we're talking about the people starving in Yemen, which I've written about, or whether we're talking about the Uyghur Muslims who are in prison camps we've talked about in the show in China, Western China.
Right.
Or we're talking about racism in the U.S. or racism really in Brazil or France or the U.K. or anywhere in the world. These are still prevailing issues, and I think that it's interesting how, as a society, we address them. We address all these crises around the world within the United States, and I'm trying to write about them just as as an observer, but also as a person concerned, right? As a
Sure.
academic who's concerned that these issues need to be told, and also for at least for the poetry book, to have the voices of people who are not normally heard to be heard, right? That kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Ray McGovern's a former high-ranking CIA agent that I try to frequently mention this. He used to hand-write briefings to Bush Sr. At the White House, and he's come out opposed to the structure of the CIA, and he's come out and he's been opposed to mass media, and not to influence your thinking or your thoughts in any way, JP. But on this program about a year and a half ago, he said, this is the final frontier for Americans and how they receive their news and their information. Mass media, the large media channels, are completely they simply just brainwash the American public, which is excuse me, I think I said Al McCoy, not Al McCoy.
Not McGovern.
Ray McGovern,
Right.
yeah, is what Ray McGovern
Ray
said.
McGovern. I think that just to follow up on that point, this is a point that was brought up by Noam Chomsky, Ian, and that's the point of manufactured consent. And that large media, as you know, is controlled by large corporations. And so, I mean, they form opinions, and like you said, they form it. They don't really have minority opinions often, or you don't really have dissenting views. And because of that, you were subjected to these sound bites. And as you mentioned, with the mass media is not favorable to like these kind of discussions. I mean, you get it somewhat, like if you watch PBS or get your news through that NPR, right? You get it through there, but not every American does it. People are divided also because of what the media has done with Fox and MSNBC, and so we're a divided public because of how the media has constructed the political atmosphere, right?
Right.
So,
And division creates chaos, and out of chaos comes opportunity. JP, thanks for joining Discuss Your Truth and Windward Radio. I've just received word from management. There will be a new address coming up for listeners to type in to search engine. JP, some final thoughts from you, sir. Some final thoughts.
Well, I guess my final thoughts are that we're entering this new year, 2020, and my hope is that our leaders are more accountable to the people that they represent, and that we're taking things seriously, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, climate change, and we are addressing issues which are sensitive to society, whether we're talking about racism or extreme violence or whatever. And I think that there is evidence of the latter being addressed, but it's still worrying that we have to have a discussion or serious discussions about climate change and now when it's fairly evident that we have this all over the world. Last year, 2019, being the hottest year on record.
Wow.
And so my final thoughts are that we need to do better. We always need to do better. I mean, we always want to do better, but all of us, not just leaders, people in general, and this is the point of my last article, all of us individuals, part of society, can be peacemakers in our own right. It doesn't have to be people in the peace field. It doesn't have to be leaders. It can be just everyday people. Go volunteer. Get involved in your community. Do something. Help people out. There's homeless people to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done, right? So.
Excellent. With some great thoughts. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, JP. JP, we'll bring you on next month. We've got a slate lined up here, going up all the way up into May, actually, for Discuss Your Truth. We got bookings all the way up into May, and so we'll be throwing in some double headers here, and we will make it work next month. I'll be in contact with you about having you back on the program, JP, as long as schedules work for both of us. Congratulations on the new books, and until next time, JP. Appreciate you coming on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, JP Linstroth.
Thank you so much, Ian. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you. Have a great day.
And that's JP Linstroth. He is a former Fulbright Scholar to Brazil and PhD from Oxford. He teaches in South Florida. And I know he teaches somewhat at Barry University, or used to. Anyway, you can find his work simply by Googling JP Linstroth, just as it sounds, Linstroth. And he has regularly joined Discuss Your Truth for about a year and a half now. And as I had mentioned, we try to bring him on most regularly once a month, and strive to bring him on the first Wednesday of the month. So look for that coming into February. Next week, Josh Reeves. Next week, another doubleheader. Josh Reeves coming at you from Dallas, Texas, and we'll follow Josh up with Dr. Jane Ruby. She's a speaker and author and a firm patriot, American patriot. She'll talk about her book, A Sea of New Media. And this is becoming a increasing important issue. That is how you, and I receive our news. And what is news? How do you define media? Ask yourself this question. How do you define media? What is media? Is media online radio? Is media podcasting? What are your sources? How do you know you can trust your sources? Fake news. Okay. We started this program as Florida Sun and Spray Show. There's a Florida Sun and Spray Show. That meaning enjoy the wonderful rays of the sun while you're being death sprayed with a toxic, highly toxic, neurotoxic chemical that is dibrom. The Florida Sun and Spray Show. It evolved to Discussions of Truth and continues to grow. IanTrottier.com has all of the past guests, past and those scheduled for the future. Dear Maid McCulloch is got a PhD in divinity studies at Oxford, I believe. Tobias Churchin being rescheduled. Amy Yarsinski being rescheduled. A. Ralph Epperson scheduled. William Blunden, Kevin Shipp, Tom Hartman, Bandy Lee. The program has been very fortunate since its inception. You can find a full list. Anton Chaikin, you can find a full list of past guests and future guests at IanTrottier.com. Donate to the program and look for Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. That is a book authored by myself, Ian Trottier, Trine Day Publishing. You can buy that, or you can pre-order it right now. Just type that into your browser. You can order it on Amazon. You can order it from other online retailers. Pre-orders coming in. That'll be released April 2020. And folks, until next week, this has been another discussion of truth. This one, a Linstroth Report from JP Linstroth. Until next week, be awesome.